Something I always liked about Homestuck was its ability to portray the weird relationship randomness has with inevitability, where on a literal level there was always a build up to that unforeseeable thing happening. Meanwhile, there are some seemingly isolated choices with catastrophic consequences that boil down to an arbitrary decision that was made without foresight. I recently finished listening through the Gravity Falls commentary tracks, and one of the first things Alex Hirsch said hit me like a brick to the skull. Hirsch said the team wanted to make a show that was as rewarding for the viewer to watch as possible. This lit up a power line all the way back to an on-the-surface completely unrelated statement by my senior and contemporary Red OSP. In a video from a little over a year ago at this point, she's talking about the pitfalls of making a multiverse as a plot device, and says,
I just don't like it when a story gives me a big pile of fun things to get invested in, and then punishes me for caring about 90% of them. And that's kind of the heart of the multiverse problem.
The video, titled The Multiverse Problem, is about the ways retconning multiversal mechanics into a story to write oneself out of corners or just try something new with a story without foresight can jar audience investment, and her framing of those things as a punishment clicked together against Hirsch's convictions about Gravity Falls rewarding the audience for their time and attention like the most profound of Lego bricks. See, when I first saw the word punishing being applied to art, it was in the context of video games. Way back when Extra Credits still had the majority of its original team, they did a video tracking the change in game design philosophy away from reaction time and memorization-based games to mechanics that are meant to be intrinsically rewarding to play through and master. I do not remember where that video is. Consider it a scavenger hunt. First person to find it gets pinned. The video as I remember it made a distinction between games that punish failure versus games that reward success. This fundamental shift is why Souls-like games can be so divisive, put a pin in that. The gallant Red Eyes Take Warning takes issue with the volatility of multiverses as a late addition to a story, because to be invested and immersed in a story is to trust. And when her entire sense of what the story is made of and is promising gets thrown into the engine of we're hopping universes and mashing multiple timelines together to fundamentally alter the entire story, she can no longer trust that whatever baseline they establish next won't be similarly revoked for the convenience or impulses of the author. When Red says that to retcon events and change settings and disrupt or recontextualize character arcs mid-story is to punish the audience for caring, she is espousing the same values that Alex Hirsch is espousing in the commentary tracks from a completely different angle. The idea that one of the core aspects of what makes art worth experiencing is to be rewarded for caring and investing your time and attention. We only have so much time on this earth. We cannot be spending our recreational time on things that don't give back to us. When Hirsch talks about how he and the team wanted Gravity Falls to have a strong, interconnected continuity of background and foreground elements and real ciphers and Easter eggs put in exclusively for the audience to find and solve, he's talking about the silent promises and implied agreements that get made between artist, art, and audience. So much of Gravity Falls is for the direct benefit and joy of the audience. The team trusts that things that delight them will have a positive reaction out of an audience. They make sure to keep track of all the promises they've made to the viewer and fulfill them to the best of their ability. They follow every storytelling sensibility they can and bend or snap the ones they think they can get away with while maintaining their baseline of quality. Re-experiencing Gravity Falls through these commentary tracks actually kind of threw into perspective how very not tailored to my tastes Gravity Falls was. I don't like ciphers. I don't click with the show's sense of humor. I don't think the art style is very interesting. When the show started making Pacifica a character we are meant to feel some level of sympathy for, I was immediately displeased. I was also in middle school, so I don't really trust that impulse anymore, but the point still stands. Listening to the tracks, I remembered suddenly how suspicious I was in the 5th grade of this new show entering my life, and I only gave it a chance because I was delighted at the prospect of a set of twin protagonists. Hirsch and the team describing all the ways they poured love and time and attention into the show to make it as rewarding and of quality as it ever could be filled me with the realization that the thing that kept me coming back to the show was that palpable feeling of love and consideration and detail. It was the texture, it was the momentum, it was the life bursting from every character and every piece of animation. It built that texture through its attentive continuity and commitment to the bit. It kept that momentum through a strong grasp in the writer's room on character character and story, and according to Hirsch, the dead bodies of all the previous drafts of episodes. Everything is alive because the team behind the show worked with clarity of purpose and unrelenting love for their art. Gravity Falls is an undeniably excellent show, and it's undeniably excellent because all the hard work of these people manifests as a wonderful treat, a reward for anyone who chooses to have even a casual interest in the show. And then I asked myself a question. In a world where Gravity Falls exists, is there even any room to argue for any piece of art that could be described as punishing? To fulfill my promise of looping back to the video games, another opinion I've heard Red OSP share, which is very much in line with this reward-based philosophy, is that Souls-likes are far too punishing and unrewarding to actually be worth any reasonable person's time. She is baffled and incredulous at these games and the fandoms they garner because Souls-likes go out of their way to be inaccessible and make the silent statement that a casual, curious amount of time and attention and caring is not good enough. You need to care so much and invest so much time and attention and skill building into the game that it becomes part of your bloodstream. Under the lens that art should strive to maximally reward the audience, Souls-likes punish you for not being hyper-proficient and not sinking hours and hours of your life and significant chunks of your energy into getting incredibly good at them, because the skill floor is being incredibly good at them. For people who stake their pride on being really good at really hard games, that's supposedly all well and good. But if you apply the aforementioned reward-based philosophy Gravity Falls employs to the Souls-like art-artist-audience relationship, that's not making art of quality, that's pandering to the audience's ego. What is the core reward for all of this time and effort spent on the game? Getting to experience the full game at all? The developers arbitrarily barred the full game behind a bonkers hard difficulty curve. Why should a normal person who doesn't feel the need to self-flagellate to prove that they're so tough and determined care? Why did Homestuck become such a phenomenon amongst a bunch of middle schoolers on the internet? Like, really think about that last one. Homestuck is light years away from being as rewarding to experience in isolation as Gravity Falls is. Explanations for why things are the way they are either non-existent, stupid, or profoundly obfuscated in a storytelling structure and language that resembles next to none of the standard convention. A huge chunk of the speaking characters are kind of annoying and mean because they're middle schoolers, and also there's way too many of them. So much of the humor is referential and absurdist and completely bounces off of a brain not primed for its rhythms and sensibilities. Example, in the first pages, the narrator and forward arrow prompts establish the idea that John is actually armless, and his character sprite is not just a simplified stylistic choice. We move a cake out of consideration for his perceived lack of arms, and it is suggested that he retrieve some arms from his magic chest. We don't know the rules of this universe. We just got told that it is only today that John turns 13, and that he's been given a name, which we presumably gave him. Then, the narrator all but turns to the camera and calls you ridiculous for believing that John has no arms. Why would you think that, you buffoon? You fool? I am aware that originally Homestuck worked on a forum prompt system where Hussey took prompts from the audience to pilot characters around, but that doesn't change the fact that Hussey didn't have to do that when a subset of the audience suggested that John might not actually have arms. And this is a regular structure of joke from the comic. Introduce an idea or concept that the audience likely didn't even fully consider yet, follow it to what would usually be its conclusion, then reveal the entire idea was a farce from the start. It's a prank! We, the audience, are regularly being pranked for the gall to believe in the surface sincerity of this comic. The entire comic works on the art of the rug pull and hiding things in plain sight. We, the audience, didn't realize Dave Strider was being abused until he himself pointed it out. And suddenly we had to contend with the fact that, wait, we just kind of took that stuff for granted as the way this universe works. What do you mean our beloved Appley Juice DJ boy was traumatized before the plot traumatized him more? That retroactive clarity is deeply important and impactful for every Strider in this comic, and it was clarity that Hussey could have provided us at any time. They just chose to bop around and flaunt standard storytelling practice. and this applies to nearly every detail of import in this comic. There's like 4.5 distinct sets of characters that we bop between, with zero telegraphing of who's important long-term and who's important short-term, or what this means for the story until after the thing has already happened. There are entire integral plot points that amount to silly wordplay, or a little whoopsie-doodle on the part of cosmic causality. There's long, rambly blocks of text and conversations between characters that are functionally just hussy getting carried away and or pinballing their OCs around in a box, seemingly with zero regard for the fact that this is a story with an audience who has limited time and attention and capacity to care about all of this. To pull yet another voice of critique/analysis from my personal lexicon, Jello Apocalypse, aka Brendan Blaber, constantly talks about efficiency of storytelling. The idea that you cannot be wasting the audience's time asking them to care about extra stuff that does not matter to the core of a story. You must justify why you have spent valuable word count on meandering nonsense jokes and valuable art assets on gaffes that do not follow proper comedic rhythms. You cannot have joke characters be in the main cast and give them full proper introductions and dramatic storylines they're not equipped to carry before killing them off unceremoniously. Why? Because it's wasteful. It is not valuable. It is asking for more of the audience's trust and time and energy than doesn't sufficiently reward them. It is not competent storytelling and should not be rewarded with attention. It punishes the viewer for believing this was worth their limited time on this earth. But I sincerely believe Homestuck is very much of quality. I believe this quality does not just exist in spite of its inefficiency and penchant for punishing the audience for expecting it to behave as other things of quality do. I believe a certain level of its quality is because of those things. I believe there is value to being inaccessible and punishing. And no, it is not because it makes the audience feel like they've earned being part of the exclusive club of people who get it. In the great big Homestuck retrospective video Sarah Z did on 4/13 of 2021, she hypothesizes that the reason Homestuck as a phenomenon got as big and wild as it did was mainly to do with the creativity of the fans and the way they latched onto the characters. While people attaching themselves to the characters and immersing themselves deep in the fan culture around Homestuck is surely the defining feature of the cultural moment that was Homestuck, my knee-jerk reaction to this observation when I first heard it was to become incredibly miffed. And I figured out a little later it was because neither of those things have anything to do with Homestuck's own merits as a piece of art aside from having interest-sparking character concepts. And it does have more merits that I never see anyone talk about. Hussy's greatest strength as a writer is their ability to chain actions and events together like an absurd narrative Rube Goldberg machine. So, if you are paying the requisite amount of attention, you are rewarded with being able to see the interlacing chain reactions with clarity and detail, instead of feeling like you're being bombarded by nonsense and chaos. Why do you think Cascade is remembered unilaterally fondly to this day? That didn't just happen. Hussy connected and paid off nearly every dangling thread and instance of lingering tension that existed in the comic up to that point. It's experimental and interactive. It employs GIFs and flash games. It has such a strong and distinct narrative voice. The music isn't just beautiful, it is evocative of everything Homestuck stands upon. These are tracks you'd find looping in different levels of a video game. Boss music, tracks tailor-made for locations and characters, tracks that simply capture the vibe and can be slotted into various places depending, and titles that give us insights into the characters and events and themes of the story. The album art gives us vital extra-canonical information. Like, part of the reason Moonsetter makes me cry is because of that peaceful pastel picture of Dirk sitting alone on his little tower in the middle of the ocean with a sword speared through his shadow. That was a song made about having a moment of rest and reprieve when your life is a kind of distressing and stressful that can't quite be externalized. The way the strings and piano become more emphatic and strained near the end before fading out into an unresolved chord. That changes just the last two notes of the melody that's been repeating the entire song changes everything, because there is no resolution to this moment of peace, and you have to go back, but you have to remember this, and you can't kill your shadow, but you can face the moon. But to get to that stuff that makes me so emotional about it, you have to get through a lot And not in the planned out, considerate building kind of way, in the we'll get there when we get there kind of way. The difficult thing about Homestuck is that it is a punishing arcade cabinet of a webcomic. It requires a lot of caring and attention and raw time sunk into reading through paragraphs and paragraphs of color-coded text if you're going to get anything of substance out of the comic. If you want to read Homestuck ironically and vibe with its sense of humor, it'll absolutely meet you there and give you some silly nonsense for your trouble. But it won't really reward you long-term, and you kind of get diminishing returns on the relationship. You gotta go through the gauntlet before you're getting any substantial nutrition out of this guy. Homestuck does not apologize to the reader even a little for 1 single second. That prank pulled on the reader about the arms early on is a promise. The cold open to this comic says, this is what this comic is going to be like, and everything through Act 1 is a series of promises about the structure and characters and rules of this story. A lot of that structure and a lot of those rules go entirely contrary to convention, to what is intuitive, to what most people understand to be good storytelling. And yeah, convention exists for a reason, and you can't just expect your Thanos subversive nonsense to be inherently good because it's new. But Homestuck, as far as I shake it, follows its own rules as much and as close as it possibly can once it has established them. It promises that it will not be conventionally comprehensible, and it will not adapt to you. It will ask you to match your brain to its vibe, and it means it. If you'll allow a detour, something I've learned about myself while writing the script is that I am an incredibly forgiving audience. If I feel like there is an acceptable reason why something wasn't the way I would have liked or expected it to be, I will simply accept it. If there is an incompetently constructed piece of art in front of me, I will actively seek out its redeeming qualities and look at it as the things it is attempting to explore and communicate. Art is not the sum of its parts to me. It is the totality of both itself and its context. This is why I don't share Red Eyes Take Warning's opinions on Souls likes or Blaber's takes about efficiency of storytelling. I want to have loving relationships with as many pieces of art as I possibly can, and I am grateful and fortunate that I am the flavor of person who finds that incredibly easy to do. It takes some truly out there things for me to feel genuinely slighted by the media I spend my time with. I think the most profound sense of betrayal I have ever experienced from a piece of art was when a fanfiction I had been following for multiple real months of my life that was nearing its chapter count suddenly said 14 out of question mark, negated the ending it had been building up to, and entirely switched genres. It soured all the previous joy I'd experienced with it because it fundamentally broke so many promises to me all at once. It felt like I was being punished for no reason. And what was I gonna do? Leave a mean comment because they hurt my feelings? This was a fun activity a stranger was showing off as they made it. It was theirs. I didn't matter in this equation. But not mattering hurt. Because I thought we were sharing this. I trusted what I thought was a promise to me and got smacked with the reality that this was a passion project someone else was making for themselves, and they could and would do whatever struck their fancy with it. You'd think that'd make me never touch a slow burn again, but I am a fundamentally forgiving and trusting person. And loving, I suppose, though that sounds a bit self-aggrandizing to proclaim to the public. Homestuck is not an easy piece of art to love, because it makes it its business to punish the reader for expecting it to behave. It's not always of quality, but its merits don't just stop at facilitating other people's creativity. It's a deeply weird, absurd, and in a lot of ways rebellious piece of art. This was a big, unwieldy piece of experimental art made by one dude who kept bringing on more and more people to help with the force of this ball rolling at Mach 6. Of course it's gonna be harder to love than Gravity Falls, a children's show on the Disney Channel tailor-made by a trained team of artists to be loving and giving and rewarding. Gravity Falls made and delivered on its every promise as abundantly as could be managed, and then added a little treat on top of it. That is spectacular and extraordinary. But I also believe Homestuck is spectacular and extraordinary, because even though the landing was real shaky, Homestuck did deliver on as many promises as it could fit in its seemingly non-existent little hands, and in spite of its many legitimate flaws, I'll always love it for that. I think only a horde of terminally online middle and high schoolers could have picked Homestuck as the thing they chose to love, because kids in general are far more forgiving than people give them credit for, and even more determined than adults realize. And to play a particularly punishing game in good spirit, you gotta be real forgiving and real determined. But More than middle schoolers having the desire and capacity to pour that level of devotion into a piece of art without even thinking about it, the relationship built with a punishing piece of art is fundamentally about trust. Not everyone wants or has the desire or capacity to dig for the value in cutting so much slack for and pouring so much energy into something, and for good reason. But that relationship has the capacity to be deeply valuable. It's valuable because it's a unique exercise of trust audience engages in with the art and the artist. In some cases, the exercise could extend out into trusting yourself, but I already feel like I'm judging your trust at this point in the video, so I'll just leave you to talk about that one in the comments. All art and all relationships require trust to function, but the trust exercise undergone through a relationship to a punishing piece of art is about demanding more of the audience, or even just demanding radically different of the audience. The difference between an empty reward or a cruel punishment and all the hoopla Gravity Falls and Homestuck have going on is the fulfillment of the audience's trust. To look at Gravity Falls and withhold your trust when it promises to give you something unique and silly and creepy and nostalgic and wondrous is to hear it say, thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, thank you for caring with every frame, and have that wash over you without effect, because you're only here for the free samples. To look at Homestuck and withhold your trust when it promises to give you something weird and rambly and unconventional and convoluted and not apologize for that is to decide that those are unreasonable things to ask someone to bear with while waiting and searching for the kind of entertainment and catharsis you can find in plenty of other stories that are less inaccessible and dumb. When I made this script, I did not expect it to be a comparison of the writing ethos behind Homestuck and Gravity Falls. I just thought I'd talk about the applications of how we talk about video games to how we talk about other forms of art. Because when Red said she didn't want to be punished, I thought about the way people talk about Battletoads and Celeste. And when Alex Hirsch said the team wanted the show to be rewarding, I thought about the way people talk about strategically placed loot chests and cheeky messages in places you're not supposed to be able to get to. Homestuck came to mind because of the comparisons I could draw between Hirsch and Red talking about continuity and expectations, and then I couldn't put it down. Having articulated and discovered what I have while writing this script, I guess all I have to close on before I send you off with your cookies and juice to the outro is, thank you. And I'm not sorry. Woohoo! I did it! I never mean for videos to take as long to come out as they do. I had a good single month or so where my life and mental health was arranged in such a way that I could just put out at least some kind of video once a week. But, I'm gonna have to hold off on promising any more whens as far as, like, my upload schedule. Because of that, I'd like to take this moment to extend a bottomless well of gratitude. Yes, gratitude. You know, the gravity of my gratitude. You get it. To Rapturous 77 yet again for the many, many months of support you have given me. You are such a gem, and I appreciate it every time I see you bopping around.
Hi, different microphone. This video was in production for so long that I have 2 extra people to thank since writing that script. Even more gratitude towards somebody and Riley. Apparently, my Hunter Woodbane video is very popular. Who knew? People like the Owl House. Okay, that's all from Extra Microphone. Back to the outro.
If you too wish to buy my gratitude and incrementally pay for little treats I buy myself and my partner to cope with this capitalist hellscape, you can hop on over to Ko-Fi and chuck currency towards me. If contributing to your day with this video wasn't enough, then for less than what it used to cost to buy 3 soda cans at a Walmart vending machine, you can gain access to my Kill Your Darlings Graveyard and a multiple-page breakdown of the English lyrics that I made for the Revolutionary Girl Usna opening, which I ended my last video with. I've got socials if you want to go through the effort of following those, and you already know where the YouTube buttons are. That's everything. Have a super shimmery day.